Good evening. Welcome to our daily class in Rebbe Nachman. We are holding in the second Torah, Likutei Moharan, the first section. We've been discussing this quite amazing look at the weapon of the Messiah, of Moshiach, the idea of the nose, the idea of the ability to smell, Yirat Shemayim, the ability to just distinguish between the qualities that a person has, of course, first in ourselves, and then if God grants you that gift for your job, then so be it. Tonight, the Rebbe is going to talk about how you manipulate this sword of prayer. We identified that the weapon of the Moshiach is prayer, but how does that work? And how do you wield such a sword? So we are in the paragraph Gimel, and it says, Mi shezacha lecherev hazeh. The person that merits to this sword of prayer. Tzarich leda ech lilchom mito im hacherev. He needs to know how to wage battle with that sword. That he should not turn to the right or the left. That he can cut a hair with a sword and not cause sin, not come to sin. So that's quite a sentence there. It's a lot of information, as you can see. So the first part, that this sword, we understand, is prayer. And he needs to know how to go to battle with this sword. And the idea of the battle here doesn't say anything about the enemy, cutting off the head of the dragon. It talks about not moving right or left. Now, of course, right or left reflect chesed and gevurah, the two extremes of emotion and emotional activity. Chesed and gevurah being might, power, and its expression in the world, and chesed, loving kindness, mercy, etc. Well, the middle actually is mercy. And the middle is what he's saying that he has to get to. And we already identified that Jacob had this sword, our forefather Yaakov Avinu, and so he is the paradigm of Tiferet, the balance between these two forces. But what does it have to do with prayer? And we learned last time about Tefillah B'Koach, the prayer where it puts all his power into that prayer. And he goes on to tell us that you have to be able to cut a hair with a sword. Now, a hair is pretty thin, You'll be lucky with a micro sword to be able to cut a hair in half, much less a big, massive sword. So it seems like an undaunting thing that it'd be almost impossible to do. But it's not true. It is possible. That a person would be able to sense and to know the center of things perfectly. And he goes on to tell us that Efshar ela al Bechinat mishpat, and it's only possible through judgment. Now, this is not the judgment of judging others or even judging ourselves, but rather mishpat is this ability to weigh and to come to the center of any issue. And now we take that into the idea of prayer, where you have to be able to use your prayer to come to the center, not to exaggerate to the right or to the left. Now, what does that mean, to exaggerate? Well, it could mean praying the right amount of energy for each issue as it comes up in your life. It could also mean knowing which prayer comes first and how to pray properly. Now, we just saw in the that Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, says in the Zohar that the prayer of the righteous is more precious than the prayer of the poor man. And we know that the poor man's prayer is considered very precious to Hashem. And Rabbi Eliezer explains that the reason why the prayer of the righteous is even more precious than the prayer of the poor man is because the righteous know how to pray, know how to come to this level of perfect mishpat, the perfect center of prayer. What does this mean? Let's look forward. Kiv mishpat to amud emtzeita, right? And we know that mishpat is called the middle column between the right and left, between the extremes. Hayinu shekolea im klezeno shel hamakom b'makom hatzarich, that a person can cut with his weapon to the exact place that's needed. And that can mean a lot of things. To cut with your sword of prayer exactly where it's needed. You need to know if you need the thing that you're praying for. Is it really the best for you? You need to know if the thing you're praying for somebody else is really what they need. You have to have that perfect center to be able to judge a person's situation and what they're asking for, your own, and of course by extrapolation for others. And this goes very, very deep, this type of thing, because let's say you're praying for all of Am Yisrael. And let's say it's a time of din, right now we're in Sfira to Omer, which is a time of din. Plus we have this terrible virus, it's more din. And we have wars around the world, more din. We have Iran attacking our water system, etc., etc. There's more and more din. Now din is not mishpat, it's not the exact same thing. Din is pure black and white judgment, where mishpat is the balance of both chesed and gevura. Both looking at something from a broad, inclusive position. And that's the middle column, the Amuda de Emseita. And he does not exaggerate again to the right or the left. Now there are different examples of this we can go into. Let's see where he takes us. And he says, right? We have to be right in the middle. He should weigh his words in judgment. In other words, it is one thing to pray, and that's a great thing, of course. But to be able to weigh your words, to know what you're saying, to know what you should say, what you shouldn't say, how you should say it, when you should say it. That's another level of precision. And that's how you get to the ability that you can cut a hair from that level of precision. And because of this, Yosef Atzadik received the firstborn from Jacob, because their souls achieve that level with the divine trait of mishpat and yesod. One is on top of the other. And that's indicative in the tree of life. When one force is on top of the other, it means it has direct, immediate influence and access. It's because of this, Joseph was the firstborn. As it is written, Va'ani natati lecha. And Yosef, Jacob said, I gave to you, Yosef. Ani daika. Shehu bechinet mishpat. Now, interesting, this is a chidush of the Rebbe. The ani, the word ani, the concept ani, I, is a concept also of mishpat. Why? Well, he goes on to tell us, Ani Daika, specifically, Shehu Bechinat Mishpat. It is judgment, Ki Chok Israel Hu. And he goes on to say, he brings another famous verse, because it is a hidden law to the Jews. The idea of Mishpat, the idea of Ani. Because we know there's only really one true Ani in the universe. The true Ani of the universe is Hashem. And each of us have our little Ani, but if we're really working the ladder, Jacob's ladder, if we're really climbing the tree, then our Ani is constantly changing. Who am I? I remember asking myself that question when I was a teenager. And guess what? It hasn't stopped asking that question. So the Ani is this constant mishpat. This ability to look at oneself and to judge oneself, not to excessively to favor and not excessively to guilt, but right in the perfect center. Because all of us tend either to judge ourselves too much favor or too much guilt. Sometimes even both in one person. And usually it's very hard to come to the center. Some people are born with that gift, but most people have to work very hard to reach that. That true ani, that true mishpat, that true center between these two extremes. And this is Chok Yisrael. This is the hidden law. He'll go on to explain Bechinat Brit, which again introduces the concept we had last time. The way we get to this power of the weapon of Moshiach, this weapon of prayer, is through purity. Purity in relations. As it is written, Sam. And he says a law, and to the remainders he gave a law. Mishpat Elokei Yaakov. It's the judgment to the God of Jacob. Hu shetzarich Yosef v'kabel zot hacherev v'bechinat mishpat. And Yosef needed to receive this sword from Jacob. To become Yosef, the king of the known world at the time, to be able to buy and sell with all the merchants of the world and to save the world from starvation, Yosef needed real judgment, business sense. Okay, judgment in the positive sense, not the negative. And that he got from Jacob. And that's really wielding the sword. To be able to get right to the middle of every issue. Now, Kedig Shirkalkel Dvarav Mishpat, in order that he gives over his words with judgment and justice. Zeh Mishpatecha Lamelech Tein. And he brings another verse from Tehillim, and your judgments to the king you give. Why the king? Because the king is the ultimate is the judge of the land. So he needs mishpat more than anyone. He needs this ability to be able to be fair right in the middle more than anyone because he's dealing with the whole country. She Moshiach ikaber bechinat mishpat. And he goes on to tell us that the Moshiach also must receive this quality of mishpat, of judgment. Now, a lot of us have all kinds of imaginations about Moshiach, about the Messiah. As a matter of fact, the whole world does. All the major religions do. People think about it. There's all kinds of fantasies going around. Regardless, we don't need the fantasies too much. What we need is the Torah, and the Torah brings us closer and closer and closer to the middle, to the center of any issue. But it tells us that Moshiach needs this quality, but it also tells us subtly that Hu Yikabel, the Rebbe says, יקבל את המשפט. It's not like he's born with it. You know, people like to always think, oh, he's born with it. It's from God. He didn't work hard. And that's not true at all. That's a false nomer, and people think that about everything. Because it makes them feel better when they're not working as hard as they could. Okay, it's not easy to work hard. Everybody knows that. But we shouldn't think that the people that are greater than us just got it because they're greater than us. That's not fair. They worked harder. And the Arizal said it to his students, and Rebbe Nachman said it to his students. It's all based on hard work. Okay, so this idea of mishpat is something we really need to sit with, and this is where meditation can really help us. Because meditation is the idea of coming to the center, to come to your medium, to come to your middle. And that's where the true judgment is. And we need to be able to judge ourselves honestly, but not to any extreme. And if we can judge ourselves, that's real tshuva. And then we can hopefully judge situations in life better. Now the Rebbe begins the next paragraph, and we're going to end soon. How do you come to this quality of mishpat? By giving charity. Well, isn't that interesting? Why? Because by giving charity, you are grasping, holding on to the power of mishpat, of judgment. As it is written in Devarim, Tzidkat Hashem asa u'mishpat. Right? The righteousness of God he did, and with judgment, with justice. You know, Jews love justice. I think it's in our nature. That's part of being from the great patriarchs that came before us. Mishpat u'tzedakah b'Yaakov, and this is the same idea. Justice or judgment and charity is in Jacob. Ki tzedakah hu al yedei mishpat. Because charity comes through mishpat. What does that mean? Tzedakah al yedei mishpat. That when you give true judgment, it's actually a form of charity. When you give true judgment, you're being generous. You're not leaning right or left. You're not exaggerating. You're not defending. You're not attacking. You're perfectly in the center. And that is a form of charity. So that if you're a friend of somebody and you see that they're in trouble or they need help, yes, you go and help them. But how you help them depends on your ability to see the situation as clearly as possible and in the center. Of course, that applies to ourselves as well. So, tzedakah, of course, the idea of giving charity, you're giving yourself. And so mishpat is, le'elokei Yaakov, justice is to the God of Jacob. We really need to be attached to God to have truly divine judgment. So they go hand in hand. It's not like you can be a good judge without being attached to God. And if you are attached to God, then you're naturally going to have a sense of proper justice. So that's a good beginning of this third paragraph of Torah Bet. We're going to continue tomorrow. Tomorrow, of course, Erev Lag BaOmer. And I'll be teaching on various outlets on Lag BaOmer, on the Lighthouse from Florida, and in the Berot Bat Ayin Women's Seminary has a live Zoom class. And of course, we'll have our daily class here on Patreon. And then you can always catch stuff on our YouTube channel and avramshira.com. So look for you there. We're going to tell some stories and talk about the greatness of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and some of his deep teachings connected to meditation and how we can really get to that center line, that true middle that we all need, that balances and heals us. All the best to all of you. Shavua Tov. It should be a great week, and things should be getting better and better. All the best.